like, yeah, we can't really focus on the $2,000 stimulus alone. We just have to focus on, like, also focus on Trump's deluded ramblings. And if you think that he actually cares about Section 230 and whatever else, I already forgot what he wanted. But you're crazy. So he says a standalone bill to increase the payments has no realistic path to quickly pass the Senate. I mean, if you put it up for a vote, it's very, very possible you're going to see people like Holly, Rubio, and I don't know, you got 52-48 currently. And of course, this, as we'll get to, it is a very, very interesting situation going on in Georgia, where the Senate Republicans are in Loeffler and Perdue are in a very, very tough bind as to whether to support these $2,000 checks. So McConnell, who along with the members of his conference, and here New York Times reporting on this, have long resisted the idea of larger payments on Tuesday, introduced his own legislation combining provisions on the $2,000 checks and election security and the social media into one bill. So yeah, this election security. Yeah, we're going to establish an independent commission to review the election, as if Mitch McConnell actually wants to be around Trump for 4 years. He probably was celebrating in his house when Joe Biden won because he knows that Joe Biden is probably the worst politician ever and will give him everything he wants for the next 4 years. So on Wednesday, McConnell accused Speaker Pelosi of trying to pull a fast one on the president, like almost as if to say, like, oh yeah, he's a child. He doesn't really know when he's being manipulated. Like he's gonna, you're just trying to trick him here. Yeah, so the decision to link these three demands into a single bill pretty much ensures that it will not pass. McConnell's bill would create a bipartisan commission to study election practices used in 2020 and repeal the outright the most consequential law governing speech on the internet, which pretty much talks about whether Facebook and Twitter are like publishers or platforms. I think that's the basis of Section 230. It's completely unimportant, and it's just really a distraction from the system, or not the system, but the real important issue, which is survival checks to Americans, which I'm not entirely sure, but it's possible we could see some majority support for that in the Senate. But meanwhile, this is the real thing to watch when it comes to the Senate. Georgia. And we're going to go to the Daily Poster for this. It is an almost too on-the-nose reflection. This is David Sirota and Andrew Perez writing. It's almost too on-the-nose reflection of America's oligarchy that the fate of the $2,000 survival checks for starving people could be decided by a Wall Street magnate and a corporate executive who ran a retail chain that preys on low-income communities, Dollar General, and it will, and I did not know that, David Perdue used to be the Dollar General CEO, and it will play out in a state facing rising joblessness, poverty, and starvation. Pretty much every state in America facing that. Yeah, and that is the... of course, referring to Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. If you're writing a Hollywood screenplay about the battle over direct aid to millions of Americans, you would almost certainly have its backdrop be the Peach State and its special election. That is what we're seeing right now. We got Kamala and Joe hitting the trail for Warnock and Loeffler in the final week, and Trump coming by as well. Yeah, of course, Dave Perdue, he spent his time in Washington making stock trades to boost his personal wealth after running Dollar General, where he faced allegations of wage theft. As if the cartoonish corruption wasn't enough for a made-for-TV drama, the two zillionaire Republican incumbents are running against Reverend Raphael Warnock, the anti-poverty crusader who runs Martin Luther King Jr.'s church, and who pretty much has had to disavow everything he's ever said for the course of this race, unfortunately. And John Ossoff, a Pete Buttigieg-like Saturday Night Live character of a blank slate political candidate who has rightly zeroed in on the issue, calling the GOP's proposal for just $600 a joke. And really, to give credit to John Ossoff, he has really changed his campaign from just a shallow, identitarian, just typical Democratic, very Buttigiegian campaign to one that's like, hey, actually, you could get some real economic incentives if you vote for me and my buddy Raphael, as opposed to David and Kelly, the crooks. And, of course, he really destroyed, I mean, in a way that you almost never, ever see David Perdue debate, so much so that he wouldn't even show up to the next one. So Loeffler and Perdue are in a position to immediately end this battle right now if they choose to actually use their power. Senator Mitch McConnell may want to own the libs and economically punish his own destitute state by blocking the $2,000 checks, but an even bigger priority for him is holding on to his job for Majority Leader. That's how he gets his existence. Like, his life form is running pretty low right now. If you look up a picture of his hand, like, he needs some help. And he needs to sustain himself as Majority Leader. That means if Loeffler and Perdue publicly demanded the passage of this $2,000 check legislation, which I believe they have. Yeah, Loeffler said she would vote for $2,000 checks, and Perdue tweeted a pretty muted statement of support as well. Notably, though, the two senators are not saying they will back Senator Bernie Sanders' move to force a vote. They are only indicating that they will support legislation if it somehow happens to make its way to the Senate floor. And that's the key point here. It signals that these two aristocrats still are not serious, and these gestures are fraudulent in comparison to what they could do. They could be out there, like Warnock and Ossoff are, being like, $2,000 checks, please, 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 please. And it's really kind of a weird situation, because if McConnell were to go to the $2,000 checks, then it, like, if you were to support Warnock or Loeffler and Perdue in getting these $2,000 checks passed, it probably would significantly help his Senate candidates. And if he doesn't, then Warnock and Ossoff, who have been running all over the state being like, $2,000 checks, Ossoff especially, they are probably going to be more likely. And again, I'm not saying anything for sure here. I mean, we're dealing with the Democratic Party. Like, we all know how things work. But if Warnock and Ossoff were to do the Senate or win the Senate, it would be a Democratic majority, and Chuck Schumer would probably pass those $2,000 checks in very short order. So it seems very strange that a lot of people in the Republican Party are so hesitant on this. Like, it seems like whatever way you end up with, you're still very likely to get those $2,000 checks passed. The question is when. So the situation in Georgia is much like the one in McConnell's own state. The difference between Loeffler and McConnell supporting Perdue supporting $600 checks and passing the $2,000 checks is potentially a life and death issue for hundreds of thousands of people. Literally, life or death here in the pandemic. Even before the pandemic started, 1.3 million Georgians were living at or below the federal poverty line. That includes 1 out of every 5 African Americans and 1 out of every 5 kids. So since the pandemic began, food security, defined as sometimes or often not having enough food to eat, has increased by 32% in Georgia, according to census data reviewed by the Daily Poster. Meanwhile, unemployment is rising in the state. The jobless rate jumped more than 25% last month to 5.7%. And as of last month, almost a quarter of Georgia renters were behind on their payments, the 4th highest rate in the nation. And that's where direct aid, $2,000 checks, as nearly 60% of Georgia households make $75,000 or less, which means, again, they would fully qualify for these $2,000 checks. That could be absolutely life-changing. It could provide so much help to Georgians in need, whether it's spend it on rent, whether it's spend it on food for their family, pay down whatever debt they may have. It'd be a huge, huge help. And really, Georgia Republicans don't seem to care. These figures paint a very clear picture. Loeffler and Perdue's refusal to use their power to force a vote on the proposal would deny additional emergency aid to at least 2 million households in their own state during an economic calamity and during a closely contested election that will decide the fate of the U.S. Senate. And this is really the Republican Party in a nutshell. Like, this is the kind of brainwave, I don't know what to call it, the lock austerity politics has in that party, when it's probably would be incredibly beneficial for them to send a little free money to the American people for once, instead of just always to corporations. Then they just physically can't do it. They try so hard, but they just can't. And yeah, I do want to take a look at this here. This is also from the Daily Poster. These are 10 facts about the $2,000 checks and why they are good policy. So the total cost of these $2,000 checks was about $465 billion, is less than half the amount American billionaires have made during the pandemic, which is $1 trillion. The total cost of the checks is less than the amount that just 16 billion Americans increased their net worth by during the pandemic, which is $471 billion. Number two, Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk gained more wealth during this pandemic, which is $158 billion, than Congress just authorized for additional unemployment benefits for millions of Americans, which is $120 billion. And again, they still struggle to do that, and that is severely cut from what Americans received in the spring and throughout the early summer. Number three, Jeff Bezos' personal wealth increased more every second of 2020. This is $2,800. Then Congress is just considering giving Americans who are facing eviction, starvation, and bankruptcy. I mean, really, what would be nice is some sort of $2,000 checks a month to keep this actually going here. Congressional lawmakers are being paid $3,300 of government money every week to come up with ways to block these $2,000 checks to millions of Americans. And number five, took Congress less than a month to pass legislation giving $700 billion bailout to bank executives back during the financial crisis, and it's taken Congress more than 8 months to even seriously consider a far less expensive bill to give $2,000 checks to millions of Americans during the economic crisis. And that's what we always hear. This is the common refrain among Republicans and even among people like Larry Summers, major liberals who played a massive role in God Obama's financial recovery. Oh, this is bad policy. We're going to worry about destroying the economy. Well, you just threw billions of dollars. You made it rain like it was a strip club over people like Jamie Dimon and all the biggest bankers in the wake of the financial crisis. So a $2,000 survivor check would give the average soldier more money than the proposed 3% military pay raise that people like Dick Durbin and Susan Collins were so happy about. And that is, of course, the 3% military pay raise that is included in the defense legislation that Bernie Sanders and Ed Markey are filibustering in order to force a vote on the survival checks. The richest 5% of Americans received more in Trump tax cuts in 2020. This is $145 billion. Then Congress is spending on increased unemployment benefits for millions of Americans during the economic crisis. It's $120 billion. In 2016, children, elderly, disabled people, and students made up around 70% of the poor, according to the People's Policy Project. Unlike unemployment benefits, the $2,000 checks would help them, people who may not be qualified for the unemployment insurance, which is kind of tough, and you have all these ways corporations can get around having to or stop you from qualifying for these unemployment checks. An unhourly employer, federal or independent contractor, like all these kind of like loopholes that they can use. About 60% of Georgia households make less than $75,000, meaning Georgia Republican senators allowing these $2,000 checks to be blocked would deny aid to roughly 2 million of their state's households as they run for re-election. We just talked about that one. As Republicans try to block the $2,000 check legislation, a new national survey found that 78% of Americans support it, even as some pundits insist the proposal is divisive. And of course, that is in reference to Paul Krugman, the Nobel laureate economist of the New York Times. So there's your case there for some of the $2,000 stimulus checks. Right now, though, it is, of course, the end of the year, and it wouldn't be a podcast, it wouldn't be media if we didn't give you some cheesy end of the year content and, relived this awful year. And did a little looking, and I found a headline montage about 9 minutes long from the Today Show. So we're going to play that back, and I'm going to probably drop in for a few comments if I feel need be, and relive 2020.
New mystery virus from China.
The variation of the coronavirus.
Mystery
All the
virus.
victims believed to have visited the same meat and seafood market in Wuhan.
First confirmed case so far in the United States.
A surge in coronavirus cases on a quarantine ship.
They're here to take you right now.
Yeah, they are.
The risk to the American people remains very low.
Tapping